Okay, we're going to be discussing the second part of the developmental model of recovery. So we're going to be talking right now about how children respond to recovery. So these are just some statements that might represent how children might feel as the family enters the stage of recovery. Children might express that they don't know what to expect from parents. I don't know what it is okay to talk about. I don't understand the new rules. I don't know my new role. I feel abandoned and left out. This might happen because we'll see both the addict and the enabler going to meetings, but there might not be such kind of resources or groups for children. So they might be feeling left out in that sense. Um, they also might feel like they don't understand the new system. It's my fault. I don't feel close to this family, and I feel disappointed. So these are some common themes among children as they enter recovery. Children also might attempt to control recovery. So one thing that we find common in children, especially who are entering recovery, who've been in the addict family, is hypervigilance. This is a pretty common symptom for anybody who's had any kind of trauma, is that they'll be hypervigilant. And that just means that they're always very watchful, right? They have very high anxiety and they're always looking out for what may or may not go wrong. They might also have some over responsibility. They might take on tasks and responsibilities that are not appropriate. And this makes a lot of sense when we know that we've talked about already children in the addict family taking on more responsibilities, becoming little adults. Again, acting out, right? They might continue to act out and misbehave. They might also start to distance themselves physically or emotionally from the family. So some things that we can do to help children is to make sure that they're included, make sure they're informed, and to reassure them about what's going on in recovery. Some things, some statements that might be reassuring to children would be: the drinking is not your fault, you are not alone, it's okay to ask for help, your feelings are okay, your defenses are natural, and you are important. These are all statements and feelings and beliefs that didn't belong in the addict family, right? They probably did feel alone. They probably didn't feel like they could get help. It wasn't okay to feel. They didn't feel valued or important. So it's really important that these messages get relayed as they enter recovery. We're going to talk about the developmental tasks of early recovery. So again, they're going to be continuing this detachment and a reduced focus on the family, right? People are going to be starting to focus on themselves and what they individually need to do to practice recovery. Again, learning and practicing the language of recovery. So learning these concepts and how to talk about what they are experiencing. In the addict family, there's been a lot of silence, a lot of secrecy, and so learning this language really helps them to discuss and process what has been happening in the family. Also, they're going to be needing to maintain close contact with the external support system. So that might be attending meetings, that might be going to therapy, that might be having a sponsor, that might look different for people depending on what they're doing in terms of external support. But it will be important that they're still receiving external support. They will continue to learn abstinent behaviors and thinking, so trying and finding different things that work to help keep them abstinent and in recovery. Again, beginning to break the denial over the past, maintaining the focus on individual recovery, also stabilizing the new identities that they've been forming. I'm an alcoholic and I cannot control my drinking, right? Staying in this place where they accept this new identity of recovery. Also maintaining parental responsibilities. So kind of stepping up, being the parent, being the leader in the home, as where before, right, the addiction was what ruled the home and held all the power. So let's take a look at the early stage of recovery. Here's a little overview. We're going to see that in the family environment. We're going to see more stability, more predictability, but obviously there will still be some tension because this is early recovery. So they're still establishing kind of a new, they're still going to be establishing a new way of being, a new hierarchy, a new homeostasis. So there still might be some tension as they settle into this new family system. The biggest change, right, is still the absence of alcohol. Some family members are going to be feeling very hopeful. Others might feel a little more hesitant to get too hopeful since the change is kind of new. Individual recoveries are going to be underway, and we're going to be seeing that detachment from the system is going to be supported by different external supports or maybe even recovery programs. The family system is going to remain collapsed, and individuals are going to be still relying on external supports to maintain recovery. Individuals are going to need to be focusing on education and recovery language. As the parents attend to basic family responsibilities, they might need help from outside of the family in order to do this as they transition into recovery. So again, looking at the environment in early recovery, we're moving from an unsafe to a safe environment. The trauma of recovery is going to continue, right? We're still in the early stages of recovery, and so this is still a lot of change for the family. They're going to be moving towards stability. Again, because we're still transitioning, it can be chaotic. And we're going to see that there's going to be hope, intention, and anxiety all present at the same time. As we look at the family system in early recovery, we're going to see that the system is stabilizing and moving toward a healthy system. Recovery is going to be organizing the system. Individuals are going to continue to be self-focused. Family members are going to be living parallel lives in some ways as they rely on external supports. And before they can really start relying on each other. Because at this point, they're not necessarily healthy or strong enough in recovery to rely on each other. So it's going to be really important that they're still getting outside support. The foundation of the new system is being prepared, right? So we're in this place where we're having other people, external supports helping rebuild this system. So the rules have been fully collapsed. The roles are suspended, right? Everybody's trying to build a foundation for new healthy roles. Ritual is elevated to see if they support recovery. Boundaries are going to be becoming more flexible. Hierarchies will be put in place for practical purposes at home. So as we look at the individual in early recovery, the individual is going to be focusing on abstinence and on their individual recovery. This is going to be an intense period of education as they learn about what's been happening and what needs to happen in the family for them to have a healthy family and also to be a healthy individual. We're going to see less dominance of impulse, right? They're going to be as they learn all these things, they're going to be able to pause before they act and maybe process what they're thinking. They're going to be solidifying a new identity. There still might be some confusion, and some might even experience depression or anxiety during this transition. That's very common. As the addict concentrates intensely on self-examination, they will see progress and they will see self-development. So we're going to look particularly at the alcoholic and co-alcoholic and early recovery, and a lot of these things are the same for the both of them. So we're going to see behavior, right? We just talked about that, how there will be less impulse, right, as where before it was dominated just by impulse. We're going to see them practicing new abstinent behaviors. There is always the possibility of relapse or returning to old behaviors or even a new addiction, right? Sometimes people will switch from one addiction to another. So that can be pretty common. They're going to be continuing to rely on external support. When we look at thinking, they're going to be continuing to develop a new identity. They're going to be deepening their sense of meaning of the new recovery language. They will continue to challenge defenses that threaten relapse. They will also begin a process of self-examination with outside help. So if any of you are familiar with the 12 steps, right, the 12 steps help the individual to go through a process of self-examination, right? This is outside help helping them to take count of what's been going on, what they need to do to restore health within their system. As far as emotional expression, we're going to see the addict and the co-alcoholic beginning to express feelings attached to drinking in the past. They might explore feelings about what's going on in the present. They also might have some depression, some grief, even mourning as they begin to express the feelings that they have. And they also might have some feelings about past traumas, and they might be exploring those as well. When we look at children in early recovery, let's take a look at their behaviors. So often how the parents are doing is going to be reflected in how the kids are doing. Children may continue to have behavior problems and maybe even new ones might emerge. If there's just stability and growth with the parents, the kids will start doing better and they will respond as well. Thinking will change as the environment improves, right? They're going to be able to think differently as things are different and more safe in the environment. As far as emotional expression, they might still feel frightened and confused, and they might still feel a sense of abandonment as the parents continue to focus on recovery and get well themselves. And they also might be settling into stronger and more healthy relationships with their parents and gain a greater level of hope and trust. So it might be different for each child, right? They might have first experience this continued abandonment, but as the parents progress in recovery, they may also kind of switch over into this place of hope and trust and change in their relationships with their parents. So some important tasks to look at in ongoing recovery is to continue the abstinent behavior. It's going to be important to continue and expand alcoholic and co-alcoholic identities. Again, maintain contact with external supports. And this may lessen over time, right, as they are able to become more self-reliant as this new identity becomes more solidified. They may continue to work on and internalize a recovery program. They'll work through the consequences of alcoholism, both consequences to self and the consequences for the family. They're going to begin to focus on couple and family issues. They will also start to balance and integrate individual and family recoveries, right? So as where we were focusing on the individual recoveries, right, we're going to bring all those things together and we can be focusing on family recovery as well. And they can also be deepening their spirituality. Here's an overview of the ongoing recovery stage. We're going to see that the family environment is characterized by a feeling of safety, consistency, and predictability with minimal anxiety and tension, right? So the anxiety and tension have finally gone down in the system and we're finally getting a sense of safety in the family. We're going to see that the crises and normal problems of living can be addressed without threatening the stability of the environment or causing a return to unhealthy behaviors or even the unhealthy alcoholic system. Individual recoveries are going to be strong and growing, which is also going to facilitate the inclusion of the couple and family focuses. The world obviously does not change, but the individual's attitudes towards the world are changing. When we look at the family environment and ongoing recovery, right, it's a safe place now. It's stable, predictable, consistent, comfortable, and secure. Okay, more on the family system and ongoing recovery. We're going to see that there's a new healthy family system and it's stable. The system is going to be organized according to recovery principles, right, as opposed to being organized according to the addiction. The individuals will have capacity for focusing on self and system, right, without sacrificing either. So this is something that can't happen in the addict family. In the addict family or alcoholic family, right, everything is focused on the addiction. Well, now we can focus both on the system and individuals, and so that allows for, both family growth and individual growth. It's possible now to start creating a family story. We talked a little bit about how both the addict or the alcoholic and the co-alcoholic have had certain narratives that they've told themselves that have maintained the addiction, and how it's been important for them to create new narratives based on reality. And now the family can come together and create that narrative that is defined by reality of what really happened, what's happening, and what can happen. So as we look at the family that is now stable and predictable, we'll see that rules are clear and consistent, roles are appropriate, and people can experiment with new and varied roles. So they're not confined to one role, right? Maybe I was the mascot before, but now I can also be the hero in some ways. Maybe I can, really develop myself. Also, maybe somebody who was a scapegoat, right, can also stop being the one that's getting all this negative attention and start getting positive attention. So we'll see that they can kind of move between roles and that they are no longer confined to the role that they were in before. Rituals are going to be more consistent. We're going to see that boundaries are flexible and allow for appropriate connection with others. We're also going to see that hierarchies are going to be clear and allow parents and children to return to their appropriate roles. So as where before we saw that there had been like a little adult, we're going to see that now the parents are being the adults in the system, and this is really important in terms of hierarchy, that the parents are the ones that are now the adults and children are allowed to be children. So at this point, change is, right, no longer posing a threat, and the system can adapt and evolve. When we look at the individual and ongoing recovery, again, this person has formed a secure individual identity. It's now a stable identity. We'll see that there's a capacity for interpersonal focus. They can focus on both the I and the we without feeling threatened for either of those. There's going to be increased spiritual development. There'll be a shift from external to internal support, right? So as where before they were maybe relying on a support group, a sponsor, other people to help them, they are now able to internally support themselves as well as, use external support. And there will be an ongoing intense self-focus. So they'll continue to do this self-examination, being honest with themselves, evaluating, am I triggered? How do I need to respond to that trigger? Versus where before when they were controlled by impulse, right? There was no evaluation of self, right? There was no self-focus. The focus was on the addiction and obtaining the substance. So now we're going to take again another look at the alcoholic and co-alcoholic and ongoing recovery. As far as behaviors, right? The abstinent behaviors have been internalized and now secure, right? So this is now their new way of being, is being abstinent. The old behaviors may creep up, but they're taken as cue that self-exploration is needed. So as they get triggered, right, they're going to say, "Whoa, I just really had a strong craving to go do something that I know that I shouldn't. Let's take a look at this." They'll be responding in a way that is recovery based rather than impulse based. Their thinking will be based on this new identity as an alcoholic that is now securely in place. So the defenses and unhealthy traits will continue to be challenged in their thinking, and the ability for developing the I and we focus will be more present. As far as emotional expression, they're going to be exploring their feelings. They're going to be continue to recognize feelings and explore those and try to understand those. And they're also going to be developing this relationship with the higher power, and that will be maturing as they go forward. When we look at children in the ongoing recovery stage, we see that a lot of their behaviors are going to be depending on how the parents are doing in recovery. As stability at home is increased and people feel that home is a safe place, they will begin to express thoughts and feelings, and children themselves can begin to focus on beginning to heal themselves, right? For a long time, they've just been trying to survive their environment and maybe even care for their parents or their siblings. And so as home becomes a more safe place and the family becomes a safe place, they can actually focus and do some self-examination themselves. As far as the thinking, we will see that the reconnected family can now offer the children new experiences and ways of thinking of themselves and other family members. So rather than thinking like, oh, how's dad going to react? They may be thinking of dad as someone who they can rely on and go to. And as where before maybe they felt poorly about themselves and that they weren't important or they weren't valued, they may begin to have a sense of value in themselves. As far as emotional expression, children may need help dealing with past traumas, right? They may need therapy or external support themselves, and they'll definitely need help processing what was happening while the addiction was active. Children might be settling into stronger and healthier relationships with their parents with a greater feeling of hope and trust that things will continue to get better. So now we've gone over all the different stages of the developmental of recovery, and I hope this was helpful in helping you to recognize what each of these stages might look like for a family who is entering recovery, both at the individual level and the family level.